Picking my number one driver for the 2019 season was actually really tough. It was a very close call between Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz, but in the end I went for Hamilton as he claimed a fifth championship in 6 years. Hamilton's performances on a Sunday were excellent as usual in 2019, aside from the obvious in Germany and the contact with Albon in Brazil. He won 11 races, and in particular, the ones he won at the start of the season were critical to pulling away from Bottas in the championship. Bottas took the win in Australia, but Hamilton responded by winning 3 of the next 4 races, including in Spain and China when Bottas started on pole. Hamilton won both of those races by a comfortable margin to show his superiority over the Finn on a Sunday. Hamilton won 8 of the 12 races before the summer break and with a 62-point lead over Bottas following the Hungarian Grand Prix. The title was pretty much signed and sealed by then. It was more difficult for Hamilton after the summer break as Ferrari found speed, particularly in qualifying, and Max Verstappen became more of a threat. However, he still managed to win 3 races, and his dominant win at the last race of the year in Abu Dhabi shows that Mercedes are still going to be very hard to beat next year. Hamilton again was outstanding this year and the most consistent of the top drivers in the best cars. So once again, I'd have to give him number 1 ranking for this year. 17 podiums and 11 wins shows how good he was. It's easy to take his greatness for granted, but he did a mega job as usual, so congrats to Lewis once again on winning his 6th championship. In second place, I'd have to go with Max Verstappen. While he didn't quite reach Hamilton's consistency, he still had an outstanding season, did the young Dutchman. Verstappen was probably the star driver before the summer break as he finished in the points in all 12 races and never outside the top 5. He was the only driver to do that. Verstappen's recovery through the field to win the Austrian Grand Prix was simply outstanding. After being 8th following Sector 2 on the opening lap, he pulled off a series of brilliant moves. Yes, the last one on Leclerc was controversial, but for him to come back through the pack like that and get the win was an outstanding effort, even if the car was probably the best on the day. He then went on to win again in Germany in that chaotic race. He showed maturity and kept his car on the road for the most part and took the victory again. Unfortunately for Verstappen, things got a bit messy after the summer break. An incident with Raikkonen at Turn 1 at Spa ended his race immediately and his point scoring streak. Then at Monza, a really slow speed Turn 1 incident at the start. He damaged his front wing and that was race ruined again. But the worst was to follow in Mexico. It looked like he'd taken pole position, but in fact he sped under yellow flags after Bottas' crash right at the end of Q3 and deservedly got hit with a 3-place grid penalty. Max showed all signs of himself there and that was not good. Then in the race it was the same story. A clumsy looking incident with Hamilton at the start dropped Verstappen down to 8th and he had a long road ahead to try and get back to fight for the victory, but that road quickly shut as well after contact with Bottas. He tried to make a move in the stadium section and while he pulled it off, it was a risky dive bomb and Bottas' front wing end plate touched the right rear tyre of Verstappen, giving the Dutchman a puncture. His chances of victory were then gone. Instead of having 3 Mexican Grand Prix victories in a row, it was a weekend where Verstappen went back to the old days of bad driving and losing his temper. However, to say Mexico ruined his season would be wrong as well. Overall, Verstappen was outstanding. 3 wins, 9 podiums and 3rd in the championship was very impressive. To beat both Ferraris to 3rd in the drivers' standings was a really, really good achievement. And if he can tidy up a couple of things, for sure he'll be world champion in the future. Depending on the car next year, he might have an opportunity to go for it then. But this is by far his strongest season of Formula 1 so far in my opinion. For me, the surprise of the season was Carlos Sainz. After getting fairly comfortably beaten by Nico Hülkenberg 2018, the Spaniard really came back on fire this year at McLaren. 2019 didn't get off to a great start for the Spaniard as he failed to score points in the first 3 races. However, he went on to score points in 8 of the next 9, including a brilliant 5th place at the Hungarian Grand Prix where he finished ahead of Red Bull's Pierre Gasly, and also a stunning drive in Austria where he went from the back of the grid to 8th place. With Red Bull swapping Albon and Gasly after the summer break, it gave Sainz a great chance to fight for sixth in the championship, and he managed to do it following a brilliant end to the season. His drive in Brazil summed up his season: fighting spirit, not giving up, and putting in some brilliant overtakes. From the back of the grid to finish third was simply sensational. Yes, he needed some luck with the incidents between the Ferraris and Hamilton and Albon in the closing stage of the race, but even then he would have finished 8th with a one-stop strategy, and to do that from the back of the grid in such a competitive midfield would have been an incredible effort anyway. He deserved that bit of luck and deserved his podium after a series of stunning performances throughout the year, especially on a Sunday. That last lap overtake on Hulkenberg in Abu Dhabi to get 6th in the championship was simply outstanding as well, and one of the best moves you'll have seen in 2019. You would hope the F1 TV director will notice him next season and remember that he exists, because his performances deserve better than the TV coverage he got throughout the year. In his first season with Ferrari, he pushed Charles Leclerc 4th in my rankings. The young Monegasque driver finished 4th in the championship and ahead of Sebastian Vettel, which is no mean feat. Leclerc was robbed of victory in only his second start for Ferrari as he lost power in the closing stages of the race. What he did that weekend was simply incredible. He dominated Vettel and dominated the field. It looked like victory would come then in Austria, but once again in the last few laps he got overtaken, although this time fairly, in terms of performance of the car, by Max Verstappen. The move was controversial, but in my opinion it was fair enough. We want to see hard racing between these guys. His victories at Spa and Monza were magnificent. To dominate qualifying by 7/10 at Spa was simply astonishing, and then in a tough race where Mercedes definitely had an edge on race pace, he held off Hamilton in the closing stages to take his first win. Unfortunately, it was on a sour note after the death of Antoine Hubert less than 24 hours earlier. But his highest point of the season was definitely Monza. He produced a magnificent performance to hold off Hamilton and Bottas to take a memorable victory on his Ferrari debut at the team's home race. His defensive driving against Hamilton was certainly on the limit, and some people would rightly say potentially over it, but he got away with it and took the win to send Monza into raptures. It was one of the finest victories you'll see in the V6 era for sure. While Leclerc deserves huge praise for what he achieved in his first year at Ferrari, it would be wrong to gloss over the mistakes he made as well. A crash during qualifying at Baku cost Leclerc a great chance at pole position and potential victory. If not that, even a podium looked very likely considering he had a pace advantage on Vettel throughout the weekend. He then crashed again in Germany after having made a great start climbing up the grid from 10th to 2nd and threw away another opportunity of victory. Then in Japan he hit Verstappen on the opening lap, which ultimately led to the Dutchman retiring from the race. As well as that, in a number of races Sebastian Vettel proved to be faster than Leclerc when the Monegasque outqualified him. So whilst he had a very good season in his first year at Ferrari, Leclerc definitely has areas to work on and improve for 2020, but the signs are very promising for the young man from Monaco. In 5th, I have to go with Sergio Perez. The Mexican didn't have a great car this year, but he absolutely maximised the Sundays to finish 10th in the championship, ahead of a McLaren, a Toro Rosso and Renault. For me, that was seriously impressive from the Checo, and he really did an outstanding job in tough circumstances. Obviously, Racing Point were coming off a very difficult 2018 where they nearly were gone completely from Formula 1, but were saved by Lawrence Stroll in a consortium. So 2019 was always going to be difficult for the team, as the car really wouldn't have been properly prepared like it would have been in a normal season. The start of the year was particularly difficult for the Mexican. Whilst he scored 3 points finishes in the opening 4 races, he then failed to score a single one at the next 7. Driver errors at Silverstone and Hockenheim didn't help him. Usually Perez is brilliant in races like Hockenheim, but a crash on lap 2 cost him a chance at a potential podium. And if you consider where Lance Stroll ended up, you would have surely seen the Mexican on the podium. Sixth in Baku was really the best moment for him before the summer break, but after the summer break things turned round. An outstanding drive at Monza saw him hold off Verstappen to finish 7th just a week after he finished 6th at Spa. 8 points finishes in the final 9 races and consistently making the alternate strategy work from just outside the top 10 on the grid, plus a brilliant last lap overtake on Lando Norris in Abu Dhabi saw Checo seal 10th place in the championship. I do feel he's rather underappreciated and underrated and doesn't get the credit he deserves. Once again this year he was absolutely outstanding in a very tight midfield battle. Who would your top 5 drivers be of the 2019 Formula 1 season? Let me know in the comments below, but for now, for me, it's goodbye.